Well, welcome back to the School of Muscle podcast. Today, Alyssa joins me, and we're going to discuss a very interesting study that she was an author on, and I think it helps kind of answer one of the kind of age-old questions that bodybuilders in particular have, but also applicable to powerlifters. Alyssa might let you know that that's kind of more her style, but also applicable to people wanting to improve their physique as well. So the question is, how much of a surplus is kind of best for strength, body composition, and stuff like that when you're hoping to kind of build muscle tissue? And the title of the paper that Alyssa authored was The Effect of Small and Large Energy Surpluses on Strength, Muscle, and Skinfold Thickness. And I will definitely have that linked down in the description below if you want to kind of check out the study for yourself listening to this. But the first place I'd like to start here, Alyssa, is what kind of led you to do this in the first place? And I know you're kind of pulled into it, but what was kind of the idea behind the study?
I was brought into the project because Eric Helms was one of my PhD supervisors. So I arrived in New Zealand to do a PhD, and he had this project that was about to start, and I was just very excited to help with anything that I could. And I'm really glad that I did, because it is an important question for sure, in bodybuilding, but also tons of sports like, American football, rugby, powerlifting. Everybody wants to get bigger. And most people want to get stronger. And most people, when they say bigger, they actually want more muscle mass. So, answering the question of what kind of a surplus is going to help you with that is a pretty important and cool question to ask.
Yeah, and it kind of, comes back up. I'm guessing most people that are into the fitness thing enough to be listening to this kind of niche podcast probably already kind of conceptually understand the idea that if you want to gain muscle, it's probably a decently good idea to eat in a calorie surplus to provide yourself excessive energy or energy in excess to allow you to build muscle tissue and different things like that. But like you said, it is kind of the age-old question. Well, if a surplus is a good idea, is like more surplus better, or should it just be a super minute surplus? So I think there'll be some interesting findings for this study here. So did you have any kind of particular expectations heading into this study, or what was you and kind of your team of authors, what were your guys' hypothesis heading into this?
So I think the main thing that we expected to find was a difference between groups. Like how big of a difference we were going to find and what that was going to be was definitely a little bit up in the air. We had a maintenance group of 5% calorie surplus and a 15% calorie surplus. So, we expected everybody to get stronger, and to some degree, the surplus groups to get bigger, more muscle mass, and potentially bigger as in more fat mass too. But we expected to see a difference between groups.
So it sounds like, you guys expected a difference, but you weren't really hard in a certain position of what those particular differences would be. So kind of leading into kind of the methods of the study here a little bit, you mentioned that there were 3 different groups, all at like a different calorie surplus or just at maintenance calories. Could you maybe give an overview of some other information regarding like the participants, maybe if they were well-trained or if they were kind of newer to lifting? And then also, did you take them through a training program, or what did kind of the methods of this study look like?
So we had a variety of participants. Everyone would fit into a kind of well-trained group, but the difference from top to bottom end was actually quite a bit. So I think we ended up with like 17 people. Everyone had to come in to see me. We spent, a half an hour together where I would ask them about their training. I would look at their squat and bench to make sure that they could squat and bench to the standard that we were looking for. And the men had to be able to squat 1.5 times their body weight for a single rep and bench their body weight for a single rep. And the women had to be able to squat 1.25 their body weight and bench 75% of their body weight. So we did have some standards. They had to have been lifting for some length of time. And they without like breaks, and it had to be squat and bench for that time. So everyone was trained and strong. But at the, top end of that, we had some like very competitive powerlifters who'd been training forever, and some people at the bottom who like just met the requirement. They could squat 1.5 times their body weight, and they had been training for the length of time with squat and bench. So it was definitely a big array of.
Gotcha. So they all needed to meet a certain strength standard, but kind of even within that criteria, you had some people that were more or less advanced, where some people just met the standard and some people were like far more elite powerlifters and stuff like that. So definitely a little bit of variation there, but I think that as long as they kind of meet a certain standard, it does kind of help standardize the participants to some degree there. So kind of with that setup there, what did their training protocol look like kind of throughout this study?
So the training protocol was mostly supervised. We had some COVID problems where they were not able to come in, but for everyone who could during the non-lockdown periods, everyone came in for 3 non-consecutive training sessions. So there had to be at least a day in between, and they had to get 3 sessions every week. In each of those training sessions, we did warm-ups plus 3 working sets of squat, 3 working sets of bench, and then an accessory circuit. So the powerlifter in me will tell you that it was quite high reps because the squat and bench had a like 10-8-6 down to an 8-6-4 reps per set. 3 sets of 10 low bar back squats. That's high-ish. Right?
You're working. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the squat and the bench they were given a percentage to hit, but it was within, it had to be at a specific RPE. So we did push them, but it was submaximal. The only time that they actually went to failure on their squat and bench was during their 1RM testing. Whereas our little accessory circuit, every set was to failure. So they were doing rows, lat pull downs, and a lot of bicep curls, like a lot of bicep curls.
Cool. So it sounds like the training protocol, you had the kind of your core compound lifts, and then they kind of ended those sessions with kind of a circuit where lots of bicep curls, and just kind of finished it off with kind of a well-rounded, sounds like full body workout 3 days per week. And then for the nutrition protocol, you mentioned the different levels of kind of calorie surplus. So was their nutrition also like monitored? I know in some studies they do like prepackaged meals and stuff like that, or how did you guys kind of approach the nutrition side of things?
So we were super lucky because we had Steve Taylor was doing check-ins weekly with our participants. So everybody had to do a maintenance period where they would track everything that they were eating and their body weight. And Steve would make adjustments as needed to kind of keep them weight stable. And then once they were weight stable, they would come to us for the training component. And then throughout the entire study, they would do weekly check-ins with Steve. So he gave them like minimums for protein, fat, and carbohydrates, and tracked their weight gain and would adjust as needed weekly.
And then for your guys' measurements, what did you guys kind of do there? I'm guessing you guys did some sort of measurements for strength as well as body composition, but what did those kind of measurements look like?
So we did 1RM testing for squat and bench. We did muscle thickness measures using ultrasound. We did the quads, the biceps, and the triceps with that. And then we did Skinfold testing to get an idea of the fat mass that was gained.
Well, I think that gives us a really good idea on the training protocol, the participants, the nutritional protocol, as well as what you guys measured. So now to get to my favorite part, what were the results here? What did you guys find?
So, it was pretty interesting. I think really importantly, we learned that the 5 versus 15% surplus are not that different. in that it was really hard to distinguish between the groups. So saying that, everybody got stronger. So 1RM, bench, and squat went up, which was expected. The muscle thickness, though, like we didn't see much at all change. The biceps had a small change, but there was nothing else really evident, quads or triceps. And then the other kind of most interesting thing was that as body weight changed, skin fold thickness increased. So we saw that with a greater surplus, more fat mass was gained, which I think is, the big take home from this.
Absolutely. So to me, it sounds like, maybe with the smaller surplus, would it be fair to say that this group maybe experienced potentially a better ratio of muscle thickness increase without the extra skin fold increase, in which they potentially had a little bit more favorable surplus for body composition? Or what do you kind of think there?
Well, yeah. So the muscle thickness was really, there was not a lot of change. So it's really hard to say anything about that. Like strength and muscle thickness had no real relationship with change in body mass. The thing that did have a very strong relationship was skin fold thickness. So, we want to talk about muscle thickness, but we can't really. Did we not train hard enough or have a high enough volume, given the spread of participants that we had potentially? But the main finding was definitely that as you increase in body mass, a lot of that would potentially be fat.
I should have got this at the start, but how long was this study?
Anyways, so they did at least 2-week maintenance phase when they were doing their own training, and our actual training protocol is 8 weeks. So it's not a huge length of time to see changes in muscle thickness.
As you were discussing there, that kind of popped into my head where maybe within I was kind of assuming that the training protocol or the study probably was 6 to 8 weeks, as that's kind of the standard length of most studies and a lot of people will knock on scientists for only having studies this length, but go do the research, try to do a study that's longer than 8 weeks and see how you like it. So it's very difficult to do. And kind of with that would be maybe my speculation on why you maybe didn't see those increases in muscle thickness, as it just seems like it kind of takes a long time. And kind of my read on the situation was kind of more along the lines of, over the course of 8 weeks, pushing a calorie surplus up to that, 15% mark, if not greater than that, might not be the best idea, considering muscle mass and muscle thickness might take a little bit longer to accrue. But, at that point, it's a little bit speculation, considering, you didn't see much of a difference in muscle thickness. So really the only thing that you could say based on the data, which is perfectly understandable, is that greater surplus, greater skin fold thickness, likely greater body fat.
Yeah. So we did see a little bit of change in the biceps, which is why I brought up the idea that it could have been also the volume and intensity of the training, where the squat and bench were submaximal and had only 9 sets each per week. The biceps were trained every day, directly and indirectly into failure.
So potentially the training protocol may be as big of a factor as the length of the study as well, to where, maybe there just wasn't quite enough volume for most muscle groups to see those changes in thickness. And for the biceps thickness specifically, you might have said this already, but I already forgot. Did you see a difference in bicep thickness for any of the groups? Did the group at maintenance have less bicep thickness than the group in a larger calorie surplus, or were there any kind of noticeable differences when it came to that?
No, so there were no between group differences. It was the relationship with body mass change that had like a weak relationship with the biceps. So, yeah, I guess I'm just gonna pull back in the bench press. In the bench press, we actually saw that the group that had the highest calorie surplus had the best bench gain. But when looking at the bigger picture, the bench gains didn't have a relationship with the change in body mass. And in contrast, the biceps muscle thickness, there were no differences between the groups, but as a whole, the biceps muscle thickness did seem to have a relationship with the change in body mass.
What would you say are maybe kind of any practical takeaways? Maybe not even necessarily from this, but maybe other potential research that you've done kind of around this area. Are there any kind of practical takeaways on kind of the evidence as it stands regarding someone's calorie surplus? Like, do you personally think it's a good idea to be at a larger calorie surplus if someone's trying to gain muscle and strength? Or how do you just kind of personally feel about it, regardless of this particular study?
I think so. I think a surplus is important. We know that in order to build muscle, you need to have the energy to support that, and the protein to support that. And so being in a surplus for sure means that you're not in a deficit.
Yeah.
But I don't think that it needs to be huge. And I do think that you need to consider the amount of training that you're doing, like volume and intensity. So if you're an experienced lifter, and you're doing a relatively high like volume and intensity of training, then being in that surplus seems like a great idea. It's probably individual, like different people will have different rates of muscle gain. And so you would just want to be paying attention, like, am I actually getting bigger or where is that landing? But I am definitely pro conservative.
Gotcha. And I fall in a very kind of similar camp to that. And I think so I've been coaching for probably 5 or 6 years now. So been through a lot of clients. And I think not only like physiologically do I feel like people better respond to just like a slow, steady surplus. Generally, I kind of keep my clients around a 1% body weight gain per month and kind of shoot for that. And I feel like in my kind of anecdotal experience, that has led to them just not putting on as weight as quickly, which kind of mentally can really bother some people. If they see that weight jump up, 3 or 4 pounds over the course of 3 or 4 weeks, that makes them want to just head right back into a deficit. And then before we know it, we're spending our entire year, like half of it plus in a deficit, which definitely isn't good for progress. And I liked your point there on, like, if you're in a slight surplus, it at least makes sure that you're not in a deficit, which, as research suggests, being in a deficit probably reduces rates of muscle protein synthesis, reduces muscle growth, and probably isn't for sure optimal. So just being at least maintenance, I definitely think makes sense. And I think my clients have definitely responded kind of better to that. So anything else that you kind of wanted to add there when it comes to the kind of the more powerlifting and strength side of things? I know that's kind of where you lie a little bit more, and kind of the sport that you gravitate towards a bit more. Is there any kind of practical takeaways for powerlifters regarding kind of energy surplus, or would you say maybe similar to what we've touched on, as powerlifters probably use this isn't phrased correctly, but use hypertrophy as kind of a tool to increase their strength potential, so to speak? So kind of similar practical takeaways for them, or is there anything else there?
Yeah, I think it's very similar. And I think that you just kind of mentioned it, the like mental side of things. Being a part of this study was really interesting because we got so much contact with people. And while we didn't actually know which group they were in, like the people who were in the highest surplus group, the 15% surplus group, were not happy people. You think like, oh, more food, better. But I guess anybody who's actually tried to gain a bunch of weight knows that it's actually not super fun to force feed yourself. And that is a lot of the feel that I was getting from these people, was like they were not super happy with their body. They were really kind of like tired of trying to figure out what to eat. I mean, so from a just like happy life perspective, I think that a smaller surplus is actually better too. And I think that goes for anybody, powerlifters, bodybuilders, whoever.
Yep, I absolutely agree. And I think that especially certain clients like are even more on the side of a conservative surplus. Maybe they're overweight in the past and they really are hesitant to, go back through a gaining phase. Like for them, conservative surplus. But, I've also had clients to where they're just naturally very thin and they have a really hard time putting on weight. So for them, I have to be a little bit more aggressive with the surplus. So I think generally speaking, a smaller conservative surplus works better for most of my clients. But you do every once in a while get those people that they can eat whatever they want, it seems like, and they just don't gain any weight, and you really have to kind of force them. But just kind of the nature of coaching and the nature of individual differences there.
Exactly, yeah.
Cool. And maybe as just one kind of final question here, are there particular factors that someone should be aware of when like more of a surplus might make more sense? Like when I think about it, I think about, the higher someone's kind of growth potential that particular period of time, the more of a surplus I might kind of push them in. So like if they have, 6 days a week to dedicate to training and maybe they're in the summer and they're not in classes and stuff, and they have more attention to point to training, maybe we push the surplus further. Or maybe we're in a period of time in which they are maybe newer and they're, have just a lot of general growth potential because they are newer, or maybe they are particularly high responders and they're gaining strength and like we're seeing visual changes quicker. I might say, okay, they might have a greater genetic propensity for gaining muscle, so we might push the surplus a bit more. Or what kind of factors do you maybe think about when it comes to maybe pushing that surplus a little bit more?
I agree with what you've just said, 100%. If someone is new-ish, if they are low stress and high training, like doing a lot of that volume and intensity, yeah, just like everything you've just said, I agree.
Awesome. Cool. And I would say the reverse for people that probably don't want to be in a surplus, like if you're in a very high stressful situation, you don't have much time throughout the week to allocate to training, maybe you only have a couple days per week that you can make it in the gym, or maybe you've also been training for a long period of time, so you're just naturally not going to see as much growth and you're kind of in the diminishing returns phases. I would say all those reasons are signs of maybe going for a more conservative surplus. So I think with that, Alyssa, I definitely enjoyed this conversation. If people want to stay up to date with kind of your research and the different things that you're up to, where can they kind of go to stay up to date with that?
Great question. I am on Instagram. Not a lot of my research content is there, but some of it is there. So I am on Instagram.
Perfect. And hey, no worries. Most of the researchers I talk to are like, you could search my name on PubMed or something. I don't know. So
yeah, if you want a lot of mostly powerlifting research.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for having me.